Yeah, that's right. You have eyes. You read the video title. Let's cut right to the chase. I don't think 40k is that OP as a setting. Now, for those of you who are a bit observant and haven't already started typing some real colorful comments for me, you'll notice the great big that in the title. 40k is pretty OP. It's got rocket launcher grenade rifles as a standard weapon for one of its factions, the Necrons have that funny button that can accidentally start a cascade of supernovas across the galaxy, and all that dark age of technology stuff that only ever gets brought into play when someone wants to make a point about 40k being OP. The setting is nuts, but I've gazed into the abyss of what's truly considered overpowered, and there's a lot of stuff that can beat it. A pretty good amount, actually. I've thought about how to phrase it best, and I think I've finally figured it out. 40k is like Ornstein and Smo from Dark Souls. If you want to get to the real big boys of the game, you gotta get through them first. And if you want your franchise to be considered truly ball-bustingly OP, you gotta get past the kind of crap 40k has in it. Please make all sorts of jokes about how 40k is the Dark Souls of Ornstein and Smo or whatever. It's a dead meme, and 40k is nothing if not welcoming to dead memes. So here's one more video to add to the pile of them I've made comparing other settings to 40k. Something small and easy to end the year on, yeah? For those of you with similar views to me, here's a video about nothing of particular importance. For those of you who make 40k your personality, I just have one question to ask. But can the Emperor beat Goku? Before I get started power scaling 40k into the dirt, however, there's something to discuss. Do you like learning? Do you hate school and how tedious and miserable it can be? Well then have I got the thing for you, because this video was sponsored by Brilliant. Brilliant is the premier way to learn math, data science, and computer science. It's got the visuals to keep you interested. It's got the mini games and a level of interactiveness that other places to learn don't have, that make it an actual joy to interact with and learn from. And it's got something even better than that. It's all at your own pace. Do you know how important all of that stuff is? Because good lord is it important. For proof, I have yet another story of little old me in school and falling behind. You know math class. I do too, and it was my kryptonite. There was one class sophomore year of high school where to explain one of the concepts, the teacher just grabbed two pieces of paper and kept jamming them together. Needless to say, this did not help me. Well, with Brilliant, you'll get none of that. The lessons are easy to use, can be retaken as many times as you want, and you can jump in at whatever level you're at. There's no falling behind because you don't get something, and there's no being bored out of your skull because you understand everything perfectly. I'd recommend the Data Fundamentals course for a starting course. Everyone can get use out of analyzing data in one shape or another, and because Brilliant is so easy to use and learn from, it's a perfect way to get started on it. And to top it off, I have a wonderful deal for you all. Using my link in the description or pinned comment, which is also on screen right now, you get 30 days of Brilliant as a completely free trial. As an even better bonus, the first 200 people to use the link get 20% off an annual plan. That's http://brilliant.org/pancreasnowork/ for a 30 days free trial and 20% off your annual plan for the first 200 to use it. Learning is fun when it isn't made to be miserable, and Brilliant's given us all a wonderful way to keep learning no matter what age or level we're at. Get Brilliant today and start learning now. Alright, let's start listing off franchises. This will all be rather light on specifics, by the way. The love I have for Halo, or Obsession if you're feeling less generous, isn't quite shared with everything else on this list. Let's start with a pretty common one. Overall, I'd say 40k wins. The tech is bigger and badder, the scale is bigger, and a lot of the psychers in 40k could demolish the average Jedi or Sith. With that being said, Star Wars has some stuff going for it. The higher-end estimates of the Confederacy place their military at several quadrillion battle droids. That's a lot of wrist rockets you gotta worry about. So drowning out a few Crusade fleets or Orquas and droids is entirely feasible. And the amount of Force users in Star Wars that veer into being eldritch abominations is a lot higher than you might think if you're not super familiar with the lore. There's Abeloth, which is just straight up an H.P. Lovecraft creature. There's Darth Nihilus, owner of the coolest mask in fiction and a wound in the Force who eats planets for breakfast. And do you remember that time Anakin Force chokeslammed two gods in the Clone Wars? But despite this, the overall scale and relentless warmongering of 40k means Star Wars is gonna go down when you compare it to 40k. See, we're easing into things with settings I think 40k can beat. You gotta set the precedent, you know? That being said, I would take a clone trooper over the best guardsman any day of the week. Quite frankly, I'd take a clone over a good deal of Space Marine chapters. Delta Squad would body Cato Sicarius. Dead Space is real only here because I think it's cool, but necromorphs are damn scary. Humanity itself and the aliens in Dead Space probably wouldn't be seeing much competition against Warhammer. The necromorphs though, those could be a problem. Convergence events and the markers would play merry hell on humanity, Tau, and maybe even the orcs. And a necromorph infestation on the large end of things is going to play a lot like a Tyranid invasion, only even more horrifying. Imagine a space marine getting necromorphed. That is an unstoppable monster. Granted, being an unstoppable horde of monsters isn't that special in 40k, I mean there's plenty of those already. A proper Tyranid high fleet or some orc warbands could probably take on the necromorphs. It'd be risky, and if the Necromorphs win, they've got a new Brethren moon. But 40k also has plenty of ways to blow a planet straight to hell, so even the Brethren moons themselves are fair game here. Really, the Brethren moons and Necromorphs are pretty fitting in with 40k. They're damn near unkillable to the point that I think shooting off their limbs in dead space doesn't actually kill them. It just immobilizes them, shutting them down in a way. Of course, Isaac Clarke was in no way prepared to deal with them, and he managed it, so I'm sure someone like Gilliman or Eldrad could handle things. Another 40k win, but hey, if it's any consolation, Dead Space fans, I'd rather face most threats in 40k than I would a Necromorph. I can reason with the Tau at least, or at a stretch an Orc. I can't reason with the Ghost Lady telling me to make us whole. This will probably be a proper video on its own eventually, since I've been getting more and more into BattleTech as time goes on. That's for later, though. For now, I'll just say that on the grand scale, it's a pretty grim scenario for BattleTech in this matchup. It's centered around a couple thousand planets over a roughly 500 light-year radius. That's the Inner Sphere, where most of the cool stuff in the setting goes down. It contains all the great houses, what was once Star League, and it's just about all the damn clanner scum care about. Through sheer industry and scale alone, BattleTech loses to 40k. But saying that, on an individual level, I'd wager it's a much closer fight. Of course, even the mighty Atlas isn't going to be squaring up with a Warlord Titan, but come down to the scale of knights, and now we're talking about a real fight. While true, I would argue that even the most fearsome assault mechs are only equal to knights, battle mechs have a lot more in the way of versatility. A battle mech is a catch-all term for warfare platforms that can do any number of roles and also happen to walk on two legs. While there are numerous different kinds of Imperial Knights, you can safely assume they're in one of two categories. They're either going to shoot you with cannons, or they're going to try and chop you up with big chainswords. Battle mechs, meanwhile, can be scouts, artillery, massive platforms of light weaponry, and more. Some might as well just be a big gun with legs, such as an urban mech pilot armed with little more than his AC-20 and a very hateful attitude towards anything larger than 40 tons. Some have melee weapons, because even in a setting as relatively grounded as BattleTech, there are going to be some people who want to punch things with their giant robot. If you tell me you aren't one of them, I'm gonna call you a liar. There's a lot more you can do with a battle mech than a knight, or just about any of its non-imperial equivalents. And tell me that if nothing else, the Lyran Commonwealth wouldn't be pumping out Titan equivalents the moment they saw what 40k was bringing to the table. There would be people with bigger things than them. That is an insult that House Steiner simply cannot let stand. There's other smaller but still important things as well. BattleTech FTL is fairly reliable, although it is slow and unless you're skilled enough to jump to pirate points closer to planets, fairly predictable. But hey, there's also no monsters you have to worry about eating your soul whenever you jump to FTL speeds. So overall, BattleTech loses through scale, but on the individual level, it's probably a lot more even. If nothing else, even a light mech stomping on a space marine is going to get the job done. Not much you can do about several thousand pounds of military hardware introducing you to the dirt. But with that, we've given 40k 3 wins so far, so I think it's about time to fix that. Put MCU slop or whatever abomination of filmmaking DC's putting out next out of your mind. I'm mostly talking comics. At their worst just as bad in their own way, but at least no one's been shoving them down my throat for the last 15 years. Now if you're thinking on the lower end of things, then yeah, these guys are getting bodied. What the hell is the Green Arrow gonna do against the Space Marine? And if you're the kind of person who thinks Batman can prep time his way into fighting the Swarmlord or Imhotep, I hate you. Prep time is what Batman fans use when they know they're full of shit. Of course, I do the same thing whenever people bring up Halo and the Halo array, so maybe I shouldn't throw rocks in my comfy glass house. I'm talking about the higher end stuff of the comics, like the Lantern Corps. They protect the entire universe. They could absolutely deal with the people in the 40k universe. It'd take some effort and they definitely wouldn't come away from it cleanly, but they could get it done. Or you know, Superman? What the hell is a Bloodthirster gonna do against the Man of Steel? He's basically incorruptible, and he's more or less a physical god. No one's touching him. Or the Flash, who's so fast to make Superman look like he's moving through syrup. And that's not even getting into the things like Galactus, who might as well be a Catan. There's all sorts of powerful beings in Marvel and DC that at the higher end of things make the 40k galaxy look pathetically weak. Sure, at the lower end of things, 40k is gonna stomp. I don't think Spider-Man can quip his way out of getting his head melted by Cairo's Fate Weaver. But that version of Superman where he sat in the sun for millions of years just absorbing more power, yeah, he's bodying anything the setting can throw at him. Or hell, Thanos. He casts Finger Snap, 40k is now half empty. God forbid there's any crossover beyond Marvel writing some Marnia's Calgar books, though. I don't need half the Eldar lore getting sapped away. They're starving as it is. In fact, in the spirit of superpowered beings bodying 40k, There's an account called The Drunken Guardsman on Twitter who did a couple of versus tweets about who would win, with one being 40k and the other being someone not from 40k. One of them was Sanguinius vs Omni-Man, and truth be told, that was one of the inspirations for this video. Anyways, to answer that who would win question, I have my own question for you. What the hell is Sanguinius gonna do when Omni-Man starts tossing capital ships at him from orbit? There's an argument to be made that maybe 40k could BS its way into a win versus Marvel or DC's stronger characters. Morality in 40k is a funny joke. Maybe they can brutalize the other two settings into defeat. You're not doing that with Viltrumites. They're a race of Supermans hell-bent on conquest and don't view other races as being worth jack. They can obliterate entire planets over the course of a few days at most, and have their own vast empire to rival 40k. And while I don't think they're incorruptible in the sense of being immune to chaos, why the hell would any one of them fall to it? They have everything they need and view non-Viltrumites as dirt. I've not read the comics, so I admit maybe I'm missing something, but I think chaos is on the chopping block as much as anyone else. You could argue they might fall to Khorne, and yeah, they might, or they'd see it as selling themselves off to a higher power and tell Khorne to go kick bricks. With the exception of people like Magnus the Red at the very highest level of it, I don't think Psyker powers are going to do anything either. Viltrumites are at that level of physical power that just overwhelms anything else. An Eldar Psyker or a Necron Cryptek can prepare whatever spell or incantation to rewrite the Viltrumite out of existence that they want. It doesn't matter if in the time it takes to start casting the spell, Omni-Man can fly around the whole planet and rip their spine out from behind them. And even things like foresight that a lot of characters in 40k have wouldn't be of much help. Here's my reasoning for that. If you're tied to railroad tracks with no way out, you can safely assume a train is going to run you over eventually. Can't do anything about it though. And while there's certainly not a lot of Viltrumites, there's enough that you can have a couple dozen of them on a single battlefield if you absolutely must have that. What the hell's the guard gonna do about one of them, let alone a dozen? Hell, if you throw enough of them at the Emperor, he's probably gonna get his shit rocked too. I have an immediate confession to make. I only said enough of them as a peace offering. One of them is probably enough. But yeah, Viltrumites beat 40k stuff. I only included them in the video because I have the Omni-Man skin in Fortnite, so if you disagree, I don't feel too passionately about it. But you know what I do feel passionately about? Or really all of Dragon Ball, but Dragon Ball Z is what makes people sit up. You know what I've always found funny? Dragon Ball Z has some pretty fantastic FTL tech in it. I mean, Bulma and Mr. Popo went to Jupiter in like, what, 10 seconds? It takes Light 43 minutes to do that. That alone makes it stronger than 40k in significant ways. But let's not kid ourselves. No one cares about Dragon Ball's FTL technology. You're here for angry people screaming and punching each other, and by God, that's how Dragon Ball Z is gonna kick the hell out of 40k. Now, I think power scaling debates can be pretty whack, even though I've now made 5 videos doing more or less that exact thing. I've never claimed I wasn't a hypocrite. I really don't care about discussing who would win in a fight, Goku or Gear 5 Luffy. It's obviously Goku, so who cares? That said, I've been a Dragon Ball fan since I was little, and you can't be a Dragon Ball fan without at least being passively aware that there are entire communities of people who sit down and try to figure out exactly how much stronger Goku is from the start of Dragon Ball compared to Super. So in the spirit of the video and being the weeb trash I am, let's do some anime power scaling. Take a Cyberman. They have a power level of roughly 1. 1 Raditz, that is. At half a Raditz, Piccolo could blow up the moon. Hell, at like a quart of a Raditz tops, Master Roshi blew up the moon. At 15 Raditz, Vegeta could blow up the Earth. To stop ripping off Dragon Ball Z Abridged, Frieza at less than 1% of his power destroyed the strongest warrior race in existence with a single finger, who themselves could take out entire planets worth of people as infants. What the hell is anyone in 40k short of maybe the gods gonna do when the Saiyan drop pods start landing? To be fair, if any of the people in this video are gonna do something like Fall to Chaos, it'd be the Saiyans. Bloodthirsty maniacs sound like the perfect thing for Khorne, and I imagine at least a good chunk of them would probably embrace it wholeheartedly. Khorne likes strong warriors and fighting, Saiyans like strong warriors and fighting. Can you imagine a Saiyan Demon Prince? To hell with the Primarchs, Catan aren't walking away from that fight. Maybe that's how the Silent King shattered them all. He ripped open a rift to Dragon Ball and grabbed a couple of Saiyans to throw at the problem. And of course, named characters. Krillin is already obliterating anyone the setting can throw at him. Nah, you know what, I'm not taking the favoritism far enough. Yamcha could probably do it by the Cell Saga at the latest. But let's highlight my favorite of them all. Vegeta. As a good way to know if I'm absolutely hammered, see if I'm excessively posting about Vegeta on Twitter. He's great, and he'd rip 40k apart if he felt like it. Nothing's stopping him, because at his level, fighting is the kind of thing that can start shaking the universe apart, like Goku and Beerus almost did. Psyker powers, you might say, since that's the default for whenever 40k faces a threat. Saiyans have no defense against magic. And I guess that's fair. It's not like Vegeta's ever fought someone who's both overwhelmingly powerful and psychic. It's not like Vegeta's ever fought against someone who's magical in one way or another. It's not like Vegeta's been outright mind-controlled only for him to break free because he's so full of his own shit he just ignores the mind control. He's not just destroying the setting, I'm half convinced he'd become a full-blown chaos god because of how big of an ego he has. All hail Vegeta, the chaos god of pride and not knowing when to quit. Don't forget the gods of destruction, or Zeno, who could just decide 40k has lost existing privileges. There's no fight, no chaos gods or Big E holding off his power, he just waves his hand and no more universe. 40k doesn't even beat Dragon Ball in racism. Until the end of Dragon Ball, Vegeta looked down on everyone who wasn't a Saiyan as dirt, looked down on Saiyans who weren't him as dirt, and looked down on Goku like he was dirt covered in vomit. And of course, who can forget about Frieza? Frieza would make the Eldar uncomfortable with how often he calls someone a monkey. You can find compilations of Frieza saying monkey on YouTube. One of them is over 3 minutes long of racial slurs. Frieza's the best villain, truly. But yeah, Dragon Ball stomps. I made a community post about this a while ago because I decided that, yeah, I should make a Dragon Ball 40k video. I don't know why I thought that was a good idea, but I did. So here's the abridged version, since it's about the most I can make without it being a pretty shite video even by my standards. God, I'm the cleverest man around, aren't I? Get it? The abridged version? Because Dragon Ball Z abridged? Get it? Do you get the funny joke? I'm moving on now. No more anime as a main topic, I tentatively promise. Now for this one, you may be a bit confused. Stellaris isn't really a setting with defined factions and whatnot. I mean, there's the preset empires, and they used the Commonwealth of Man for the trailer that introduced planet killers, but nothing beyond that. But look deeper at the things you can find in Stellaris, and it's the sort of thing that would make the Necrons afraid. The endgame tech is the stuff of nightmares. The machine ascension is just straight up Necron biotransference. The end of the cycle is the fall of the Eldar, if instead of just creating the Eye of Terror, it created an Eye of Terror that moved around the galaxy and hunted everyone down. The War in Heaven in Stellaris isn't some mythical background event, it's two colossally powerful empires unleashing weapons that can crack planets in half at a whim. And that's not even getting into the Become the Crisis path, where your civilization doesn't just reach a point of eclipsing the Eldar or Thousand Suns as Psychers, they become a race of Chaos Gods. Even before that, there's plenty of powerful things you can do, and with mods it gets even more ballistic, turning entire moons into weapons platforms, quadruple layer ring worlds around your stars, Dyson spheres across the Empire. You can create star-spanning nations that dwarf 40k in all ways possible. And while I'm not going to pretend that half the stuff in it isn't inspired by 40k, and by inspired I mean ripped off, it also takes it all to a new level. You know the Pretherans, aka the not Tyranids? Unlike the Tyranids, who are ever only hinted at most to be running from something, the Pretheran are running from something. Something that caused the galaxy to dim and then fade as your scientist watched it. And to top it off, the atrocities you can commit in Stellaris even eclipse 40k. Sure, you can do the classic kill all aliens thing and recreate the Imperium of Man for the 1000th time. No judgment here, every Stellaris player has done it. The game encourages you to be a monster, not just because of the buffs, but because it means the endgame won't be running at 10 frames a second because there's just too many different empires in the galaxy. But the things people have done in that game, my god. My favorite is the guy who enslaved part of an empire, turned the citizens into food, and then set up a trade agreement with the former empire to give them food. That mad bastard turned a species into snacks and then sold them back to their fellows. Pay attention, Black Library writers, that's how you write a war crime. Now this is one hell of a setting. Here's the thing that inspired the video even more than the Omni-Man vs. Sanguinius tweet. For those of you who've never heard of it, the Xeelee Sequence of books is a science fiction series written by Stephen Baxter. I have yet to read it fully, but it's more of a setting-driven series and a character one to my knowledge. The people in it are vessels for the universe at large. It is also, to my understanding, one of, if not the single most overpowered setting in all of science fiction. Let's take the Interim Coalition of Governance, or ICOG for short. The ICOG is a brutal dictatorship that makes the Imperium look cuddly and friendly. I'm not just talking xenophobia, I'm talking sending trillions of child soldiers to die against aliens because it's easier to do than building robots or something of that sort. And who can forget skinning aliens known as silver ghosts alive being considered a family-friendly activity, before the concept of family was done away with in favor of more child soldiers. And they're not poorly equipped by any means. They have Melta-like weapons that can kill thousands in a single second. Their equivalent of an assault rifle is a gut weapon. If you're anything like me, you might wonder what gut means. To simplify it, take the Big Bang, the event that started our universe. Now turn it into a gun. The ICOG can throw stars at you. In their war against the Xeelee, they threw so much shit at the galactic core that the entire thing glowed bright pink. They changed the color of the galaxy because of how violently they were fighting. They have time travel weaponized to the point that they use it to police their empire. If you commit a treasonous act, they don't just kill you. They torture you, kill you, then go back in time and do it to your past self who doesn't even know what the hell you were going to do. Their military is in numbers far beyond the Imperial Guard that makes the old ones look like children, and they have eliminated all non-human life in at least one galaxy. So I bet you're thinking that, damn, the ICOG really is like the Imperium of Man, but even crazier. I bet they're the masters of their setting too, right? Not even fucking close. From the admittance of a member of it, they aren't the destined rulers of all reality, even with all of their tech. He outright compares mankind to vermin, spreading across the stars and multiplying in defiance of those who they know are their betters in every way possible. Let's start with the Transcendence. The Transcendence is humanity from the far, far, far future. What exactly they are is hard to define, because unlike most of the time with this sort of thing, the Transcendents are a race that is actually transcendent. They are to us what we are to ants, and trying to understand them is an exercise in futility. They wanted to create a utopia free of suffering for mankind. Problem is, they couldn't do that if there was any suffering, because they were every human merged into one, but also not, but also yes. If anyone in any timeline was feeling suffering, they were suffering and were weakened for it. Their way of eliminating human suffering was to fold every single timeline into one, and if they couldn't eliminate suffering through this, they would end humanity so it could be free of suffering. Let me clarify that for you, because fold every timeline into one sounds like a lot of nothing. Raise your hand for me and open and close it. There's a timeline where I told you to snap your fingers instead. There's a timeline where I said clap your hands. Those are the only events that are in any way different between those two timelines. This sentence, everything before and after it, and all the history of the world and universe at large are still the same. The Transcendents wanted to forcibly merge every single variation of that choice and every single other timeline created by different choices and events in history into one. They had the capability to do it. They were gods. They were, to put it lightly, transcendent. They could turn you into a mathematical equation and force you to watch the universe die of premature heat death because you, in particular, pissed them off. Of course, even describing the transcendent as pissed off is tricky because emotions as we understand them just don't fit the bill. And even they were nothing in the end, because, to repeat myself, the Xeelee were to them what the Transcendence was to us what we are to ants. With one singular practical exception, the Xeelee are unstoppable. Entire galactic superclusters are construction material to them. The Transcendents were tryhards stepping out of their league and were stomped back into the Stone Age along with the rest of humanity by the Xeelee. They have existed since the moment the universe formed after the Big Bang, and when that wasn't enough for their plans, they built an AI called the Anti-Xeelee that would go back in time to give them a billion-year head start on civilization building. The stuff their constructs are made out of, rather unimaginatively called Xeelee construction material, is 100% energy efficient with absorption. As in, the energy of anything you shoot them with is completely absorbed and ignored, no matter how powerful. To them, a supermassive black hole in the surrounding galaxy isn't a new place to conquer or explore and colonize, it's a computer. The 20,000-year war the ICOG waged against them ended with the Xeelee leaving the galaxy not because mankind truly won, but because the Xeelee were sick of humanity's crap and left them to their fate. For a good chunk of the war, the Xeelee just ignored humanity because mankind was that far beneath them. And by the way, when I say the Xeelee, I don't mean the race of the Xeelee. I mean the Xeelee, singular, who was in the Milky Way galaxy. They used entire galaxies to construct a ring millions of light years across that would send them to entirely different realities. Their weapons could bisect entire galaxies, and their leftover junk was the sort of thing that catapulted lesser species into a golden age. They were the undisputed masters of baryonic matter. You, your house, your school, your place of work, if it can be considered a thing, the Xeelee can rework it and the laws of physics that make it possible to suit their needs. And what you might consider a bit of a twist, they were ultimately benevolent. Their ring wasn't a weapon, it was an escape route, because the only thing capable of beating the Masters of Matter were the Masters of Dark Matter, the Photino birds. All you need to know about them is that the Xeelee were fighting a war against them and losing badly. The birds were introducing premature heat death into the entire universe for the sole reason of making reality more comfortable to them. The Xeelee time-traveled back to the beginning of existence itself to get themselves a head start, because otherwise they couldn't save anyone from a universe that would die billions of years early. And it's at least partially implied that the birds weren't even aware they were fighting a war against the Xeelee. The setting isn't going to win against 40k. The setting isn't going to realize it and 40k are in a war. You know what the kicker is? This setting, with all of its tech that could rewrite 40k out of existence? With time-traveling AI, rewriting the laws of physics and objects that can take the force of the Big Bang and not even notice? It's hard sci-fi. The biggest scientific inaccuracies within the Xeelee sequence aren't because that's not how reality works, they're because our understanding of science has advanced since the books were written. Their time travel works because of general relativity and how approaching light speed warps time and space around you. Changing universal constants like the Silver Ghosts do, who by the way aren't even particularly powerful within the setting, would result in AI with infinite computation power that can give you the answer to your question before you ask it. In theory, almost everything in these books is or was considered fully possible to one degree or another. Have fun with that thought. A few other things popped in my head that I couldn't think of enough words to make entire segments out of, but wanted to mention them regardless. For starters, I lied about there being no more anime because Gurren Lagann is up first. Explain to me how 40k is going to fight this thing off. You can't grimdark only war your way into beating it. Simon has decided he is manlier than you are, so you lost. I don't make the rules, it just happens. Doom also wins pretty handily, I'd wager. I don't mean the demons or makers, I mean the Doomslayer. That's all that's needed. If you drop the Doomslayer into the Great Rift, within weeks there is no more Great Rift, and everyone else would be too terrified of the guy to do anything about him. Except Malum Cato, maybe. They'd probably be good friends. And individual beings from Age of Sigmar could probably do pretty well in 40k. This is another one of those things that would probably be worth its own video, but in brief, the gods and the mortal realms would do just fine if nothing else. Nagash would very promptly become ascendant in a way like never before because there was a whole lot of death going around. Tyrion and Teclis could revitalize the Eldar if for no other reason than the elves in the fantasy side of Warhammer are infinitely more competent than their 40k cousins. And if you drop the Great Horned Rat into 40k, he probably wouldn't even realize he's in the wrong setting. He just set about making Hive Worlds somehow even worse to live on than they already are. Oh, and Gotrek. Gotrek would murder anything that tries to get in his way still. Doesn't matter what. He's looking for Felix, and by God, if he has to slaughter demon Primarchs to find him, then that's just what he's gonna do. And really, I think that sums about everything up. I mean, I can keep going with settings, sure, but I wanted a nice variety for the video of can't beat 40k and can beat 40k, and I think I got that. So you may ask, what was the point of this? Well, there's actually two takeaways here. If I put all of this under a guise of matching settings up against Warhammer, I get to talk about things I like without it syncing my channel's analytics. You've all been fooled by my master scheme, get own-zoned. But also, who really cares how OP a setting is? Does it really matter if some schmuck from another setting can beat the Emperor? Enjoy the setting for the wild and wacky stuff you can find in it you can't quite find anywhere else. I just think it's cool to imagine things like Night Houses going against Assault Lances while the Primarchs and Captain America duke it out in the foreground. It's silly, it's got the same energy as smashing two different action figures together as a kid, and in my mind that's the ideal way to view 40k. Not as the narrative version of a dick measuring contest. Thank you as always to my wonderful channel members. You are the overpowered piece of technology to my Warhammer fan, letting me shout into the internet about nothing of particular importance. If you'd like to support the channel, feel free to subscribe or become a member. Either way, thank you for watching, have a Merry Christmas, and take care out there. Real talk, when are we getting Warhammer Fortnite collabs? I mean really, it's well overdue. Cell and Frieza are coming, and that's not even the first Dragon Ball collab. Where's the love for Warhammer? Let me drop into a game with a Space Marine, a Stormcast Eternal, Felix, and Karl Franz. It's easy money, GW. You know the opportunity's there, you just gotta reach out and grab it.